travel. I know it
It turns out on Facebook,
wasn't convenient.
So I sort of,
Did you happen to read the article from Indiana Borough where he left? They weren't happy. He hadn't been there.
No, he hasn't been there long, but you know what? What I think happened there, I gathered his family's from Schuylkill County, and I think that he moved to Lancaster because it brought him back to his home area.
That's exactly what the article said.
Now, my concern is difficult for somebody who's that young to be in a position older was whether they would accept.
How old he is?
How old were you when you came here? There's a difference between 29 and 33, but
I can tell you I found out he's making,
and that little girl,
he's making maybe it's 88. That's what I remember.
really?
And the other guy, yeah. People have, he seems, the guy's saying from Johnstown, so
You're from the Johnstown area too.
I have a call into a buddy that was going to high school. The guy has been interviewed big places that will announce candidates in the newspaper. Not, I found like 4 or 5. So,
He looks very good. That's why I want to call Chad. I think it's the same.
Just mentioning in South Peter, they have kids. It's close by.
and Gary just advertised.
Okay.
Jim's leaving.
5:30 meeting should start at 5. Okay, it's 5:31.
That seemed to be a little odd.
You don't want her.
It's not really, we're not getting fined.
Oh, good. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. This is a special public hearing to discuss stormwater management issues, and before we proceed, I would like to ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Chrisman.
Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I see we have public comment listed next, but unless somebody has an issue that they think should come first, I think it might be better for us to hear the presentation, and then once everybody hears the presentation, we will certainly take whatever questions or comments there may be. So, Mr. Wolf, you have some introductory comments?
Yes, board members, and for those in the audience and those listening at home, I'm here to have a presentation. Before the presentation, basically to set the stage for why we are here. And I'm going to read from Pennsylvania Real-Time News. You can find this type of an article in most any Pennsylvania newspaper nowadays. This is from May of 2017. It begins with the federal government is requiring Pennsylvania communities to perform millions of dollars worth of stormwater mitigation projects. It goes on to say that mid-state municipalities are among the many jurisdictions across the United States that must perform these projects to comply with National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4 permits administered by EPA. We know that slide. I have a very short presentation that I've given to other groups before, but NPDES, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDES permit. Basically, it's the system under which we have to apply for and obtain a permit because, for stormwater, because we are an MS4, a municipal separate storm sewer system. And as part of the requirements, we must prepare a pollutant reduction plan, a PRP, and we have to address total maximum daily loads in a TMDL. Board members, believe it or not, you can actually put all those little acronyms together and they do make a paragraph. Let me read that for you. PRPs are a new requirement for 2018 NPDES permits. PRPs, pollution reduction plans, show how a municipality will reduce pollutant loads going into a waterway. Any MS4, that's Lower Paxton Township, any MS4 community that either discharges nutrients and sediment within the Chesapeake Bay watershed or a waterway project to a TMDL, total maximum daily load stream, must submit a PRP with their permit, NPDES permit application. It's very, very, very difficult to try to condense the need for Lower Paxton Township to do stormwater improvements as a requirement of federal and state law when you have to read a paragraph like that. And I've been working in local government for a very long time, and I can honestly say that I have a hard time understanding that paragraph myself. I didn't write that paragraph. I did copy it. It is from a publication explaining this stuff, and that's about as simple as it gets. In regard to this, Lower Paxton Township is implementing an MS4 program. We've been doing that for several years. We have a general NPDES permit that expired last year. We have applied for an individual permit that was submitted in September of last year. We submitted a permit application in September of last year. We have had no action on that permit application as of September of this year from DEP. The township has applied for this individual NPDES permit. We have prepared a pollution reduction plan for the Chesapeake Bay and its surrounding waters, and we have prepared and submitted a Paxton Creek TMDL, total maximum daily load for settlement, for the, in conjunction with Susquehanna Township and Capital Region Water. That PRP is for Paxton Creek, and we have, with those three municipalities, a promise to reduce sediment in Paxton Creek by 35% over 5 years. I think I went one too far here, getting too fast. What we've also done, board members, we've implemented a new stormwater management ordinance. We've undertaken for the last 4 years a multi-year stormwater facility capital improvement plan. We've spent about $1.5 million each of the last 4 years. Those have been bond funds paid for by taxpayer dollars. And we are investigating the formation of a stormwater authority, which is the purpose of tonight's meeting. As an MP, under an NPDES permit, and part of our MS4 program, we must have public education and outreach. One of the reasons why this is a public televised meeting, and public involvement and participation. We have to do stormwater illicit detection for pollution. We have to do construction site runoff management. We have to do post-construction stormwater management, and we have to do pollution prevention and in-house good housekeeping. Now, that's not the NPDES permit, that's the MS4 program only. Our NPDES permit becomes far more detailed and contains a pollution reduction plan. Board members, as you are aware, we have a phase 1 stormwater assessment that has been prepared by RAF TELUS. Representatives from RAF TELUS are here this evening to talk to us about the work they're doing in the phase 2 portion of their assignment. That phase one analysis, I'll skip this slide, but initially programmed a potential fee of between $118 to $174 for a typical single-family residence on an annual basis. Now, board members, it's also important to know that this is a mandated program by the federal government, which has forced, of course, the state government to require Lower Paxton Township and all other Pennsylvania municipalities to participate and comply. Non-compliance would be a violation of the Federal Clean Water Act. I think Mr. Stein can tell you what violation of the Federal Clean Water Act can provide to us.
Depends what kind of violation it is, but all violations carry some kind of a penalty. Most of them are monetary. Violation of the MS4 program can lead to hefty fines that can go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on what the violation is. Also, if there's willful violations, those can turn into criminal type penalties, and you can end up going to jail for that. Thirdly, there's a possibility if you don't comply that you have to enter into a consent decree with either EPA or DEP to remedy the violation over a period of time. So not complying is very costly, and it could relocate your residence to a place where you don't want to be. So that's pretty much where the penalties are. It has a lot of doors in it.
Yes, with bars. And not the,
Right.
not the fun type. Yes. Mr. Wolf, do you have anything additional?
I don't. Are there any questions, board members? I'll be happy to address them. Mr. Stein would be, and we have consultants here, Keith Redling and Jen Fitz, who can also talk about this part of the subject before we get further involved in Lower Paxton and phase 2 of our stormwater study.
And just one real quick note, I just was checking. It doesn't look like this presentation is on the public
It should be.
agenda. Okay, well,
Yeah, it may, oh, no, we did not get it on. We will.
okay.
Actually, board members, and you may want to refresh, what you're looking at is a presentation that was revised as of about noon today. So we've had some minor fluctuation in the document. We didn't want to put it up in a incomplete form, but we will.
Okay. Keith, would you like to make some introductory remarks, and then we'll see if there is any public questions up to that point, and then we'll get to your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Keith Redling with Raftelis, and I have with me my coworker Jennifer Fitz, or Jen Fitz. We have a presentation to make about the current state of affairs of our work on stormwater management funding for the township, and Ms. Fitz will do the first 1/3 of it, perhaps. I just thought I would make a couple of remarks about the things that Mr. Wolf said. In summary, this is not the only jurisdiction where we're working, and the challenges are similar in a lot of places, which are that stormwater management costs were already pretty stiff. There's a lot of infrastructure in the ground, and the new evolving regulatory framework, as described by the big mouthful of acronyms, has just gradually crept along like a train ever since 1987. 1987 were the original amendments to the Clean Water Act, and they redefined stormwater discharges from urban areas as a pollutant of concern. And everything that's happened since then, right up through the MPDS program, the MS4 permit, the TMDL in Lower Paxton Creek for sediment, are just gradual expansions that came from and through the amendments to the Clean Water Act. So thousands of jurisdictions across the country face similar issues. So what we see here in the township is that your costs for stormwater management are going up by 60 or 70% in very short order to comply with rules that are non-negotiable. huge increases in cost. And that said, Ms. Fitz is going to take the first part, and we're going to present this body with what we believe are the 3 or 4 key issues to grapple with about rate structure, rates, and impacts were the township to fund this program with a fee.
Before we do that, are there any questions from any members of the public relative to why we are here? Okay, then want to make sure everybody understood that before we get into the how. Jen?
All right. Thank you so much. We're glad to be back in front of this body to talk about the stormwater utility implementation project we've been working on with township staff and manager, and with input from Mr. Judd along the way. So we are going to present to you kind of what we've been working on, and this is sort of a critical juncture for your feedback and direction, which will let us know where to take it from here. We can jump to the next one. So Mr. Wolf did a great job reminding this group what we have talked about in the past, so I will try not to rehash that too much. As I'm sure you recall, we were looking at how the township might fund this enormous increase in stormwater needs, which are in large part driven by the TMDL and regulatory requirements. We looked in detail at the costs the township is expected to face over a 10-year period, and we presented this body and the public a detailed breakdown of what the fiscal year 2019 costs look like. So I think we just looked at a breakdown of that a moment ago, but it was approximately $2.6 million in kind of existing costs that are going to continue into the future, and about another $900,000 in new costs in the first year. So we talked about whether the township might prefer to fund that through an increase in real property taxes or through a stormwater fee. And we presented kind of that analysis to this body, I think 3 times, so you know it pretty well by this point. We ended up recommending a full funding of that, the existing costs and the new costs, through a stormwater fee based on the impervious or hard surface area of a property. And kind of the basis for that recommendation was that hard surface area is the kind of closest proxy to a property's cost drivers. So it causes the runoff, which causes the township's stormwater management and requirements. And so that makes it kind of the fairest way to approach stormwater funding. And then it also means that all of the revenue generated through a fee would be dedicated to stormwater management. As we know, we've got to do the things in our stormwater plan to remain compliant. So that's kind of a key piece as well. So that was our recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry, can we go back for one more moment? Mm-hmm. That was our recommendation as of April of this year, and this body took action, I think a couple weeks after we were last in front of you, to proceed with the stormwater utility implementation and analysis. And so since that time, we have been working on kind of 3 main components. We've been doing data development, which I'll describe in a little more detail in just a moment. We've been discussing various policy decisions and the implications of those policies with staff and the manager, and we're bringing those to you tonight. And then we've done a little bit of planning for outreach, which will be heavily informed by the decisions made by this body. All right, so this is just a little timeline of kind of what the project looks like. We are now planning on, if this board so chooses, to issue the first stormwater fees on sewer bills beginning in July of 2019. Because those bills are quarterly and because they're billed in arrears, we will essentially be collecting revenue for services rendered in April of 2019 and beyond. So these are along the left-hand side here. We just have the tasks in our project scope. We are, as you can see, in the middle of the policy development phase, and we've got a bit of time to hammer out some of the details. But we are planning some outreach on the 25th and 26th of this month. So we want to make sure we get some of the big decisions squared away before then. All right, so I mentioned data development. When we did the feasibility phase of this project, that included an estimate of what the total impervious surface area was within the township. It is pretty time and labor intensive to measure all of the hard surfaces in the township, so we didn't want to undertake that until we were sure we wanted to go down this road. So as you'll recall, the original fee estimate was a range. And that was because the rate base, or the total impervious area in the township, was not known at that point. So since we got the go-ahead in April, part of what we've been doing is actually measuring every single rooftop and parking lot and sidewalk and other hard surface within the township, so that when it comes time, for non-residential properties, and we'll talk in a moment about single-family residential properties and the way we might treat them. So anyway, the goal of this exercise is, of course, to be able to issue fees that we're confident in to every property owner, and to support good customer service and accurate financial planning. That's it for this slide. All right, and then I mentioned outreach. We have been working with staff and with Mr. Judd and talking about what our outreach might look like, because this is this is a big decision for the township, and it's potentially impactful to a lot of your residents here. So we want to make sure that everyone is fully informed about what the plan is and what the potential impact would be. So we've got some meetings set up, or tentatively set up, for the 25th and the 26th of this month. You can see our list of groups to be meeting with here on this slide. The goal is to meet with groups that have kind of a common set of interests or concerns or perspectives at one time. So the nonprofit community is going to feel a little bit differently than the big commercial community, which might feel different from apartment complex owners. And
Jen, I have shared with the
Yeah.
board the draft spreadsheet of the specific entities within each of the categories, and board members have provided additional information.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And then last but not least, of course, the decisions that are made by this body will inform that outreach. And so at those meetings, we do seek to inform and to gather feedback from those groups, but the major kind of overarching policy decisions will be in front of you before that.
Jen, where will those meetings be held at?
That I do not know. Leanne Urban has been coordinating them, and George, you might.
We haven't picked sites yet because, of course, the dates aren't finalized, but those that we can have here, we will. If this facility can't accommodate, we will go to off-site locations like we do with our sanitary sewer mini basin meetings.
And how did you do the measuring of the non-residential? Was it just through Google, or how did you do that?
We used the most recent aerial imagery available to us, which I believe was 2017 imagery, but I can double check that. And in ArcGIS mapping software. We have a technician that goes in and zooms into every property and measures every surface.
Okay,
So they're
I was just
they're
curious.
hand drawn and they're carefully done. Yeah. All right. So on to the good part, the key decision points. We can go to the next slide. There are 3 decisions in front of us this afternoon. And we are seeking direction from this body, but we understand that it will probably take a bit of time to kind of think through it and mull it over. So thanks. So we're requesting decisions by the September 18th meeting, which is about a week ahead of the outreach meetings that we'll have. So that'll be plenty of time to kind of incorporate those decisions into our messaging and into our draft rates and all of that. The 3 decisions that we have will each impact either the cost of administering the program, the rate structure itself, which is how we kind of assign a fee to an individual property, or both. And those 3 decisions are, first, whether to implement a flat fee for all single-family residential properties, which would be the simplest way to treat your single-family residential properties, or whether to establish a series of flat rates, maybe 3 rates, so that any kind of significant variability within that one property class could result in a different fee. And Keith is going to provide some more context and information on each of these, so this isn't the whole discussion. A flat rate versus a tiered rate will impact both the cost of administering the program, because it causes some additional administrative work for someone to keep up with what category each single-family residential property is in. And then there's also an upfront and maybe ongoing, but probably decreased ongoing cost of data maintenance, which is to measure a significant number of properties so that we can appropriately figure out what those tiers would be and what the breakpoints would be between them. The second decision is about whether to implement a credit program. And a credit program would be a way that the township could incentivize and reward decentralized stormwater management by private property owners on individual lots. These types of activities, if well done, could help the township meet its sediment reduction goals and kind of lessen the burden on the township to manage all of its stormwater runoff. So that decision to implement a credit program would have the increased costs of staff people to administer it and to make sure that, and to be out in the field, making sure that any sorts of activities or devices that are getting credit are doing what they're intended to do. And it would also represent a decrease in revenues because the incentive would be a financial one.
So Jen, that would
Yeah.
be an additional person for administration if we go to the tiered, and then you're talking an additional person to be out in the field if you do for the credit program.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking 2 additional personnel on top of one that we would be hiring.
That's right.
Okay.
And we have modeled a third person. If we were to do both of those options, it would be an administrative person to manage tiers, an administrative person to manage credits, and a person in the field. Now, ideally, this could all be done as efficiently as possible, but they are distinct additional program costs, so we wanted to make sure we looked at them kind of comprehensively.
Okay.
All right, and then the third decision that is in front of us is whether to consider a rate structure that relies on property characteristics other than, but in addition to, impervious area. So on those, we are considering whether there might be a fee related to gross area, which is just the total property size, or a fixed fee just for some of the administrative costs that would be similar across every property. And so, like I said, we will talk a lot more about all of those options in just a moment. That particular decision impacts the rate structure, so the way we assign a fee to a property, but it would not likely change the cost of administering the program. All right, I think, good.
Jen, just a quick question.
Yes.
Does the size of the township come into play as to which one might be the best route to go in comparison to, say, a real small township versus a large township?
There are a number of things to consider, and the size is one, so that kind of impacts the level of effort it would take to manage these different programs. We also want to think about sort of the development characteristics of your township, how similar or dissimilar the single-family properties are, for example, how much big vacant land there is, and some other things that we'll talk about in a moment. Anything else at this point? Okay. This slide, I think, enumerates some of what I was sort of just verbalizing. In previous discussions, and I think in some of the slides that Mr. Wolf showed a few moments ago, we had looked closely at the FY 2019 cost of about $3.5 million. We use that to be able to break down kind of what the new costs are in the first year of some of our new requirements. For the purpose of looking at these different policy decisions and their impact on rates, we opted to look at kind of the average baseline costs over the next 5-year period. So this is $3.8 million. And the baseline costs shown here include many of the things we just discussed: the MS4 compliance, the restoration projects related to the TMDL and pollutant reduction plan, some of the ongoing maintenance activities of the drainage system, including street sweeping and leaf collection, and then kind of the base administrative cost of an additional person. On top of that, if this body so chooses, there could be additional costs related to the tiered residential rates, and this is just sort of breaking down the staff person I mentioned and the data maintenance costs, which are about 2.4% above those baseline costs. And then the credit program would be about 4.7% above those baseline costs. So 2 additional staff people plus some potential revenue loss. And I think that does it for me. I'll turn it back over to you, Keith.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Jen. So I'm going to delve a little more deeply into these 3 or 4 key decision points. And the first one is flat versus tiered residential rates. So when we talk about residential single-family properties, first of all, 85% of all the parcels in the township are single-family. So the vast majority of parcels are single-family, and under a stormwater utility fee, it wouldn't be very unusual that they would all be charged exactly the same amount each quarter, flat rate. And the advantage of that is that it's very simple. It doesn't require any additional measurement when a new home is built. We know that that home will be charged the flat rate. And the amount of measuring we've already done as a part of the project is sufficient for rate making. And therefore it's the least expensive option in residential rate making. Some type of simplified residential rates are the norm in stormwater fees. So one kind of simplified residential rate is one flat charge. Now, the downside to that is the houses are not all identical in the township, and the bills are for the hard surface area, not for the house. So we're not talking about the heated square footage of a house. We're talking about from the sky, how much of the lot is paved in asphalt, concrete, or rooftop. And so there's a fair amount of variability. And what we have here is a frequency histogram. We've measured hundreds of residential properties in the township carefully, and some have as little as about 1,800 square feet of hard surface area on the lot. And I'm sure if we looked hard, we could find a few even smaller. The typical one is about 3,400 square feet of hard surface area on the lot. And under one flat rate structure, they'd all be charged for 3,400 square feet each. And then our non-residential ratepayers would be charged in units of 3,400 square feet, equivalent residential units. You can also see as the histogram moves more and more toward very large, we don't have nearly as many, but even out at 7,800 square feet of hard surface area, about 1% of the ones that we measured were that big. So this is normal everywhere we work. There's a spread. The spread is narrower here than it is most places, I would say. So we have more similarity in the residential housing stock in the township than many other places that I've worked. And that would suggest if you wanted to have one flat rate, it would be defensible. It's the least expensive choice, but it results in the same charge for the ones that are smaller and the ones that are larger. It also saves the township money because the data management costs are reduced. And Jen showed you already, we expect a $10,000 one-time additional cost to do enough work to get the 3 tiers done, and then the services of one additional staffer in perpetuity to keep track of it. As soon as we have more than one flat charge, we're subject to being wrong, and we have to measure carefully and stay right. So that is a little deeper dive on one flat rate for residential versus 3 different flat rates called tiered residential rates. The next thing is rate structure. Impervious area is the most common rate structure for stormwater utilities. But there are lots and lots of different rate structures, some of which include a fixed charge. And you might see that a lot of times with water and wastewater bills. So if you think about a water bill, it's typically not zero when there's no consumption. There's still a fixed charge because there's a cost to serve. There's an availability of the service to the ratepayer. So it wouldn't be wrong to imagine in a stormwater fee that there could be a small fixed charge and then a larger variable charge. So we looked at impervious area plus a fixed fee. And we also looked at gross land area. So gross land area, is it Mr. Zumas? Did I pronounce it correctly? Had asked the question a minute ago about what characteristics of the township might steer one toward one rate structure versus another. And one of the important things is to ask, well, what am I spending my money on? And one of the big things we spend our money on here in the future is sediment control for that TMDL for Lower Paxton Creek. So when you think about sediment as a cause of cost, you might imagine sediment could come from undeveloped property where there's no hard surface area. And that under that kind of thinking, recovering some of the revenue from a gross area charge might be appropriate. And so in our modeling, when we looked at gross area as a rate metric, we imagined 20% of the revenue coming from a gross area charge. The biggest stormwater utility in the Commonwealth is in Philadelphia, and they have a gross area charge that is designed to capture 20% of their revenue. They also have a fixed charge and an impervious area charge. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but that's something they do. Hampton Township has one charge, impervious area. And so these rate structures will not drive up the cost of administration, and the reason is that gross area is not a thing we have to measure with a human being and keep track of. It's derivable from the tax data natively. So, and a fixed charge is a fixed charge for every account. So we're not, although the rate structure could get complicated if you used all three metrics, it won't drive up the cost. The cost of keeping track of it is all on the impervious area. So if you think a little bit more about that gross area charge, the one thing that it does do is it would create some bill for undeveloped property. Under an impervious area rate structure, undeveloped property won't be charged at all. So if someone owns a 5-acre tract of all vegetated, that's a zero bill. If you add an impervious, if you add a gross area charge, then a 5-acre undeveloped tract will get a bill too. And you might think that's more fair if we're going to append these charges to wastewater bills, which is the intent. Then undeveloped property's not likely a wastewater customer right now. So we have a little bit more challenge tying these properties to existing wastewater accounts than we would with developed property. So that's another variable in play. If we go to the next slide, the fixed fee allocates some of the cost to a per parcel basis. And like I said, this would be pretty normal in other utilities, electricity, gas, water, wastewater. And some of the things that might appropriately be allocable to a fixed charge are costs that the township bears that relate more to the fact that someone exists as a customer than how big a customer they are. So the cost to bill, collect, do customer service, maintain the data for billing, those are costs and administrative costs. Public outreach. So public outreach, the cost is more allocable. How many customers do I need to reach out to than how large a customer is in terms of their impervious surface. So if we go to the next slide, the typical residential property here is less than an acre and has 3,400 square feet of impervious surface on the lot. That's the typical. And we have several slides like this, and there's a lot of data carried on this slide. And I just need to talk about it for just a minute. Baseline in dark blue, the 4 bars that are dark blue, that is, what would the rates be to capture the average $3.8 million a year over the next 5 years that we need in revenue? The dark blue vertical box. And there are different heights under the different rate structures. So the 4 rate structures are just impervious area, that's the left one. Impervious area plus a fixed charge, impervious area plus gross area, or all 3 factors. And you'll see that the blue boxes go up as you go to the right. So if you're a residential property in the township, the least expensive rate structure for you is a plain impervious area rate structure. If we add in a fixed charge for each ratepayer, remember I said 85% of the accounts are residential. So if we have a fixed charge, 85% of the fixed revenue requirement will be borne by residential ratepayers. A lot less than 85% of the impervious area in the township is on residential lots. The same is true for gross area to a lesser extent. And so if we look at our 4 rate structure choices, all designed to generate 3.8 million average over a 5-year period, the least expensive rate structure for single-family residential is impervious area. The most expensive rate structure is all 3. The 3 little lines above the blue boxes are the way that the revenue requirements go up if you make choices that cost money. So if we add residential tiers in, we don't need 3.8 million anymore. We need 3.88 million. So our rates are going to have to go up a little bit in trade for 3 differential residential rates. Similarly, if we add in a credits program will reduce the charges for a ratepayer who does something on their property that should help mitigate their demand for stormwater management from the township. But the township still needs $3.8 million a year. That help doesn't come right now. That help comes after I retire and after the solicitor retires, and your new regulatory requirements perhaps are a little bit reduced because of the good efforts of ratepayers in the township. But in the near-term planning period, you don't need less money because people have done things on their properties. So in the near term, a credits program will reduce revenues because the ratepayers who earn the credit will be billed less. These are properties that have stormwater controls on the property. And we know there are about 300 non-residential parcels in the township that have detention ponds on the parcel built and maintained to control stormwater runoff. So these are the types of properties that might be billed less under a credits program. Revenues are reduced. We still need the same money, so we raise rates. And then our tallest bar on here is if we have a tiered residential rate structure and a credits program, those both drive up our revenue requirements. But the important thing I think for this body is the shape of the 4 bars doesn't change. If you're a single-family detached residential ratepayer in the township, a rate structure based only on impervious area would hold the rates the lowest. One based on all 3 rate structures would drive rates the highest. And my next slide just tabularly demonstrates the exact same thing. And I should say these are estimated rates, but compared to when we were giving you ranges, we now can narrow down and feel that these are pretty close. These are estimated, but we've measured the non-residential impervious surface, and given your revenue requirements and our knowledge of how much impervious surface is in the township, these should be quite close, say within 10%. So you'll see that the lowest rate is recover only the baseline revenue requirement using a impervious area only rate structure, annual charge of $128 estimated. And the bottom right-hand corner, a program that includes tiers and credits, which both drive up your need for monies, and one that uses the more complex rate structure, that $128 a year becomes $169 a year. So a pretty significant bump up on the residential charge. Now let's look at those same impacts for some non-residentials. Since we need the same money under every approach, you might guess the bars are going to be going down on the rest of them. This medium-sized property is the Baskin-Robbins Dunkin' Donuts on Lingelstown Road. And Ms. Lindsay asked about the impervious surface. You can see in this that their parcel is the one with the yellow. The yellow is what we measured. You can see how good those aerial photos are. They're better than what you can get on Google. Mm-hmm. These are commercially acquired. They're ortho-rectified. And then a very capable technician who's worked for me for 25 years manually draws the yellow stuff one at a time. And so what we see on this is it's a 1.3 acre property. there's about 30,000 square feet of hard surface area on that lot. If you divide that by 3,400, you get 9. So a good way to think of it is there's 9 times as much hard surface area on this commercial property as on a typical residential lot in the township. So under an impervious area rate structure, whatever the rate is for a residential, the rate here would be 9 times that. The charge would be exactly 9 times that.
That would be 128 times 9.
That's correct. And so here you can see that as the rate structure moves up in complexity, the charges drop on the commercial ratepayer. Most of the properties are residential, so a fixed fee is borne disproportionately by residential ratepayers. This township does not have a lot of open land. If there was a lot of undeveloped land, the gross area rate structure could shift burden away from residential. But the vast majority of all the land area in the township is residential. So the gross area rate part doesn't do much here, doesn't change things much. So you'll see, as Ms. Lindsay said, $128 a year was our estimated residential. And you see the blue bar over here, pretty much right at 128 times 9. And it goes down as we add pieces to the rate structure. Even though your costs go up, the burden is shifted away from commercial toward residential with the different rate structures.
Keith, and I know you're going to do other sizes of properties, but and just to give you a quick break here, it's interesting that if you look at the property behind the Dunkin' Donuts, which we're all familiar with, I'm going to say that property is 8 times the Dunkin' Donuts in size, 7, 8 times. So they would be looking at an annual fee of about $10,000. And neither of these are by any means our large commercial properties.
Yeah, $3.8 million a year from hard surface area. These are serious, these are big rates. I mean, the revenue requirements are high here.
Keith, how often would the annual fees be reviewed? Every 5 years, every 10 years?
Well, the way that it would typically work is, first of all, there would be an appeals process right out of the box, and any ratepayer who thought the township had it wrong, and we're agents of the township in our effort to measure things, the appeals process would allow for an appeal and a review, a fix if anything was done wrong, and the bill would be fixed. After that, the opportunity to appeal would exist in perpetuity for a ratepayer. And new photography comes out every year or two, and typically what jurisdictions do is they take the new photography and they go through and look for change, possibly augmented by looking at a building permits file. And so that would be the norm. We have some customers who update these maps as fast as every quarter and subscribe to recurring updated imagery from satellites. We have other clients who do it once every 2 years. And my sense would, I think you have an obligation to make it right. It's important to make it right. Doing it every quarter is pretty expensive. And my sense is annual or every 2 years is okay as long as you have a good appeals process. One thing that does bring forward is the measurements are always going to be from the past a little bit. In other words, when a new photograph is acquired, there's manipulation of that data that has to happen to do something called ortho-rectify the imagery, so that when you overlay your parcels for the township on that imagery, everything's in the right place. So the imagery is always a little bit out of date, and that means when new things are built, typically it's a little bit of time before you catch them and start charging for them. Similarly, although it's less common in a place that's growing like this, if someone took out, if they removed impervious surface and revegetated an area, then it might be a while before you caught it from a new photo, but they always would have the opportunity to appeal. Say, I tore out that parking lot and planted begonias. And you can just ride out there and check and change it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just have
So-
another question, Keith. So during the appeal process, they're still going to be required to pay their quarterly payments. But what if they refuse, could they refuse during the appeal process not to pay them?
Well, your remedies for someone who is refusing to pay the bill will depend in part on the way that Mr. Stein helps us craft the rate ordinance.
Okay.
But most jurisdictions, including the township, have great powers to compel payment. And so that would be worked out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I just want to add that the connotation of an appeals process might be that it's kind of a long, drawn-out process. I think we would advise something a bit more informal at first, which is just you customer, let us know if you think something is wrong. We'll check it right away. So ideally, there wouldn't be kind of a long period of time where a customer is getting a bill that they don't agree with.
If we go to the next slide, I just have tabular info here. So again, if you are this mid-sized commercial property, the Baskin-Robbins Dunkin' Donuts, as the rate structure gets more complex moving to the right, their annual costs go down some. And that same as the bar chart showed. And then we have another example on the next slide. This is the shopping center on Union Deposit Road that has the Staples and the AC Moore Craft store and all that in it. And this property has as much hard surface area on it as 283 residential lots. So you see our measurement. The yellow is the hard surface area. And a property of this size,
Do the math.
No, that's too many digits.
close to $30,000 a year
Wow.
in stormwater charge on a rate structure designed to capture 3.8 million a year. And their bill would go down close to $1,000 a month under a rate structure based on impervious and gross and fixed, for the same reason that the bills go up on all the residentials. So all of the ways that we modeled this generate the correct revenue, 3.8 a year roughly. We modeled it for 4 different rate structures and 4 different revenue requirements. So it's 16 options, which is why I don't have much hair anymore. And all 16 generate the same revenue, but it comes from different ratepayers in different forms. And because so much of the property is residential, 85% of the customers are residential, fairly minor changes in their annual charges going up result in fairly significant decreases in commercial charges. And obviously, because it's not a tax, we don't have an example here, but a church or another non-tax paying property would be billed just like tax paying properties. And then finally, you'll see on here, on the high side, around $30,000 a year. On the low side, as low as around $20,000 a year, depending on rate structure. So that's my last slide. The recap is 1 flat rate for residential or 3 different flat rates. 3 comes at a cost, but allows us to charge the residential lots with small amounts of impervious area a somewhat reduced flat charge. The medium ones would be the same as under 1, and the large ones larger. Whether to have a credits program or not, which is a way that ratepayers who have things on their property to mitigate stormwater issues would get a break. Those are going to be non-residential properties typically. And then rate structure, just impervious area like Hampton Township did. Impervious area plus a fixed charge, which might be analogous to water and wastewater in a lot of cases, what I would call a volumetric charge, and then a fixed fee. Adding in gross area, which captures some revenue from undeveloped land, but doesn't change things much here because of the nature of your development, or putting in all three like Philadelphia did. So those are, and we know this body doesn't make decisions tonight. We saw this as an opportunity to educate. We need to know your tendency in thinking before we do outreach, to try to do outreach in the simplest way. I feel like it's a mighty big mouthful to talk to potential ratepayers about the 16 ways you might do it. So we'd like to entertain any questions and try to help you.
Keith, are you working with any of our neighboring townships?
We're working with the Borough of Carlisle. Our company has worked with Capital Region Water, although we're in between engagements right now. We have looked at stormwater funding issues with them some. I mentioned Philadelphia Water Department. They've been a client of ours for many years. And we're working with Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. I think those are all the ones in the Commonwealth right now. But we are at all times working for 10 to 20 jurisdictions on the same issue.
I had a quick question, Keith. I recall just walking through the township, and this could be overthinking it, but is there a way, I mean, for residential, we're measuring impervious area, not necessarily, and the footprint of the house is not included in that, or it is?
It is.
Okay.
So the roof, what I would say, the roof print of the house is included.
Okay. So the idea that modest homes, people of modest income, but maybe with extraordinarily long driveways, which we do have some. We have some that are upland hills. I'm trying to make sure, I'm not just simplifying it to where, more impervious surface automatically means bigger house, easier ability to pay. But if we're adding in the footprint of the house, I guess we can safely assume that a larger, the impervious area, you're talking about generally a bigger home and ability to pay.
I would say there's a lot of variability in that thinking from one jurisdiction to another. So I would say in general, impervious surface is not a great predictor of affluence, and neighborhood is more so. Now, we have more similarity in the residential housing stock in the township than average of places where we work. So my suspicion is that ability to pay and impervious surface correlate more here than average, but I have not done any analysis on that. The classic example is a lot of places we work, there are some really little houses with long driveways. And so the house itself may be small, it may have a low tax value, but there's a lot of impervious surface. There's a little less of that here than other places, I'd say.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions? I'd like to see if there's any public
Yes,
questions.
if I do, Mr. Chairman. Keith, this is your area of expertise. You do it every day.
I do.
And with that expertise, as you review each municipality that you look at, obviously there's some commonalities. Obviously there's some rather unique and very specific things that are just pertinent to that particular municipality. So therefore, in your analysis, you give us options, and when I hear 16, that bothers me. Only because is this comparable to other municipalities? But more importantly, I'm going to very specifically ask you, with your years of experience, your expertise in the field, recognizing the idiosyncrasies that would exist here as they compare to the trends that you deal with, what will your company recommend to us?
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot.
that's okay. I think a gross area charge doesn't add much enhanced equity here because of the distribution of property types and the typical amount of impervious surface on different lots. So there are places where Jen and I work that have dense urban areas and very rural areas within the same jurisdiction. And they may have regulatory requirements that, for example, relate to nitrogen and phosphorus discharges. And nitrogen and phosphorus discharges can come in heavy amounts from undeveloped property. So it makes a gross area fee really logical. Here, we looked at it, I didn't feel like it added much. So the first thing I would say is, you certainly could do it, and it would be well within a defensible rate structure, just like Philadelphia did it, but I don't think it adds that much here. I also think there's a less compelling reason to do residential tiers here than many places we work in terms of the variability in housing stock. There's less variability. Not that there's not a lot still, and you saw the frequency histogram, but that histogram has a much broader spread in some areas than here. The other thing is that the township faces a big increasing revenue requirement. So we need a lot more money than we were spending on stormwater. We need it soon. Almost all the drivers on it are inarguable regulatory requirements that propagate from the federal government. And a simpler rate structure at the beginning, at least, means less money spent on customer service, easier to understand to ratepayers and the general public. There are jurisdictions I have helped set up stormwater fees as long ago as 1991. And they almost always started with one residential flat rate and a simple rate structure. And after they had everything measured and they had a lot better data and they had years under their belt of managing the program, some made some adjustments to make it a little bit more refined. To do all that on the very first day, if you don't really need to, kind of just makes it a little harder. The other thing to realize is a stormwater charge is hard to explain anyway. It's not metered.
Right.
It's much harder to explain than water, wastewater, electricity, gas, or taxes. So making it as simple as possible to explain has a value. And it also holds your costs down. So these enhancements to the way you could do it all came at a price, as you saw.
Mm-hmm.
So put on the spot to make a recommendation, my recommendation is generally to be simpler is better unless there's a compelling reason not to.
Right. Again, and just as a follow-up, hearing that with going with the old adage from my background is you have to creep before crawl before you walk, before you run. And in your experience when someone starts out, and I'm going to just say the flat, just to start there, the basics, and then how long would you give or recommend to them as they begin to refine that and begin to build in the second and third and fourth elements? I don't want to say levels, but elements that would enhance the program that they have.
Well, we modeled rates for 5 years. So the rates that we used to come up with these tables of estimated charges are rates that would generate sufficient revenues so that you didn't have to change rates for 5 years. Now, if you were willing to change rates every year, you could come down a little bit on these. Typically, I would advise to set rates high enough that you don't have to change rates every year. And then after 5 years might be an appropriate moment to reconsider the issues of rate structure.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that comment because those of us who sit here as elected officials, and not only as elected official, but also as taxpayers also, it is much easier to go through a good educational program with the community, establish that rate, but also giving them the opportunity to know that this will be a program that would be monitored and refined as things progress. So, and if I'm saying anything wrong, please correct me.
You're not.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm reminded of the acronym KISS.
Yes.
Keep it simple. Stupid. But we're not
Excellent
stupid
one.
here, but we sure might want to keep it simple, at least to start, because it's complicated enough to explain to people. just explaining the reason why this is being done, as Mr. Wolf's presentation illustrated, is difficult enough. So at least at the outset, personally, I think keeping it as simple as possible. But we do have a hard ending at 7 o'clock because we have our regular meetings. So before we go any further here, are there any questions or comments from the public in attendance at the meeting this evening? Yes, Eric.
Good evening. My name is Eric Kessler, 4090 Continental Drive. I first want to applaud the board because there's no question the stormwater issue has to be addressed. My concern or questions, I own a number of various types of property in the township. And I do want to say that we need good government, not more government. And I'm going to really, really implore you to look at a flat rate for residential. Otherwise, you'll have appeals like the tax appeal. It's going to become a revolving door process when 85% of the effective homes are single-family residential in such a narrow area. It's almost a no-brainer and makes common sense. I do have a couple questions, if I might, for your staff. Are you saying, related to commercial, I own a number of commercial properties, that 3,400 square foot of impervious would be equal to one housing unit? Is that fairly said?
Yes.
Okay, and that would be rate, for example, if I own a shopping center, 8.5 acres of impervious. So it's going to be 3,400 square foot times one house unit cost, whatever that is. Is that fair?
The rate structure, once the 3,400 square feet is called an equivalent residential unit of impervious area.
Okay.
So if the rates were set at $30 a quarter for an equivalent residential unit of impervious area, and you had 8 acres of hard surface.
$14,000, I've done it.
So 8 acres is 340,000 square feet. What is that, 100 houses worth?
Roughly. Here's my question, where I'm headed to. In the one development I'm speaking of, and this isn't a particular question, but it affects many people. We're doing some pervious paving at an expense. I would like, not an answer tonight, but I would like the board to take into consideration some type of credit for pervious paving. Familiar with pervious paving. The purpose of why we did it was to enhance stormwater management, and with the underground system, I mean, we spent a couple $100,000 extra dollars because it was the right thing to do. But I would like very much to think, whether it's a credit or commercially, it's simply you pay, let's say, 50% of the equivalent house unit for pervious, whatever percentage you use. But I'd like to be able to be given some consideration on that.
In follow-up to that, if we do just a flat rate for residential, can we do a flat rate for residential and then allow credits for commercial or nonprofit properties, or do we have to have a flat rate for everybody?
No, it would be fairly typical to have a flat rate for residential, but still have a credits program for non-residential properties.
Okay.
And to the point of pervious pavement specifically, many jurisdictions, pervious pavement that's maintained to be non-discharging, meaning water does not run off the surface, would just be excluded from the impervious area.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need a credits program to do that, and the break is...
That's where I was headed.
Yeah, and the break is complete.
Because we would want to encourage people to do
That's
that
right.
type of paving.
The issue is that the pervious pavement would need to be functioning as a non-discharging pavement. And that requires some maintenance of the pavement.
And teeing on that, the maintenance requirement is within developer's agreement and it's bonded, so there are mechanisms to hold us accountable. I appreciate it because that's a big concern, because we plowed about $300,000-400,000 extra dollars into doing the right thing, and I didn't want to be penalized. One last question, and I'll step down. I also own 2 farms in Lower Paxton Township. The farms they're not making it now. How, for example, I have a 93-acre farm which will have 2 houses, let's say about an acre of impervious, fully vegetated, fully growing. I know the township likes trying to preserve the farmland. This farm I'm trying to preserve, but I'm getting killed by everybody has costs. I get it, I understand it, but I surely can't be charged some exorbitant rate that's going to, quite frankly, cause me to say the heck with it, I'll develop it.
Good point. That's the purpose of us having these meetings, to get that type of input. So with that,
And if I could add, Mr. Henry, the issue of a gross area charge comes to mind on agriculture. So a rate structure that charges only for impervious surface likely would charge a farm less.
Okay.
There's not that much hard surface area there, but there may be a lot of acreage. So the rate structure that does not include a gross area fee component minimizes the bill to an agricultural type property.
For example, in my case, and I think my case is very typical, the impervious I have on the farm would equate to the same impervious, or very close, to a single-family lot. It's just I have a bigger lot that's all pervious with crops. So if, each house was charged the residential rate, if it fell within an acre or less, or whatever the number is, that's fair, reasonable. I don't mind paying my fair share, but you can only be squeezed so much, and now you're going to force people to develop more to cover the ends.
And there is another side of Mr. Kessler's discussion, and that is our purpose for addressing a TMDL and a Chesapeake Bay pollution reduction plan. And our purpose is reduction of sediment. And farmland does create sediment. It is sediment that we have to reduce, and there will be a cost to the municipality for it. Totally undeveloped land, forested land, doesn't create settlement unless there's unusual circumstances. But farmland, by its production, does create settlement. I'm not saying that you should have a gross area fee, and Mr. Redling has given us good reasons why we may not need such a fee. But my point is that farmland in and of itself is not necessarily just an exempt activity that doesn't create pollution.
do we know how many farms we actually have in Lower Paxton Township?
We probably do as part of our comp plan
Your comp
analysis.
plan, you have a graph that
Yeah,
shows all
there's
that.
really very few.
I was surprised to find there were 2 that was still up, so.
No, but my guess is there might be as many as a dozen or so.
Okay. Not our large operations, obviously, because we just don't have that.
Now, Eric, are you cutting hay, or are you doing more than that?
No, we're making hay.
You're making hay.
Yeah, trying to make hay.
Yeah. Well, but that in and of itself, and this is part of a further discussion, but that's far less intensive agriculture than actual crop farming. So there's.
Exactly. You can't get labor now. That's the issue. So you have to mechanize, and grow what you can mechanize. Well, I thank you for the time.
Thank you for your
I
time.
appreciate
Yeah, we
it.
have about 5 more minutes, so do we have anybody else who wishes? Yes, 2 more. Mr. Minsker, would you like to go, and then we'll have a second gentleman?
Good evening, Board. I'm Bill Minster, 5956 Linglestown Road rear on the square in Linglestown. Your recently completed Linglestown project, Eric and I were on your Village of Linglestown committee. We encouraged property owners in the project in reference to their stormwater runoff to do, well, really there were three things that were done. And I'm curious if they would be billed the same way in reference to water that comes off the roof. We have properties in the town where there's no control of the water. The water comes down a spouting and wherever it goes, it goes. We have properties in the town that all their spouting and all the water that goes through the spouting goes into the existing township storm water runoff system. And we have, I know of one that has a cistern system where all the stormwater runoff of the roof goes into a cistern and doesn't go onto the ground. In this plan, if there's a flat rate, are all of those structures built the same way?
If there's no credit program, then all hard surface area would be billed the same.
So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mark Levine, Oldcrest Road, Lower Paxton Township. Gentlemen and ladies, I don't envy you. You got a job ahead of you, and you're gonna have your headaches. One area we have, which is going to be a problem, is the northeast section of the township. I've mentioned this at other occasions. Linglestown Road, north of Linglestown Road out to Piketown, from let's say Patton Road on out. That's all pretty much undeveloped area up in there. It's going to be developed. McNaughton's already out in that area as well. There are some farms out in that area. And while we've been talking here about putting a roof plus pavement driveway, those areas, as they are developed, there's also going to be city streets. That's also impervious. And to meet the 35% reduction in flow, which I expect that's what it, I mean, I get confused sort of between the 35%, whether it's reduction in flow annually.
It's
or
reduction in sediment.
Reduction in sediment, okay. So you're gonna have to have someone do an estimate as to what our flow is now in sediment, and is the sediment organic or is it mineral, or both, which it generally is. And that should be done, quite honestly, at the Susquehanna Township line. That way we don't start funding stuff for them.
Mr. Levine, I can tell you that DEP has modeled our settlement coming from Lower Paxton Township and given us quantifiable numbers, and they're contained in the pollution reduction plan.
Good, good. Is there a drop dead date for the completion of this 35%?
In Paxton Creek, it is a 5-year period, township-wide. For the Chesapeake Bay, it's a 10-year, a 5-year, 10% amount. Total goal is 35%.
Thank you. Okay. My suggestion would be that the Paxton Creek sediment issue should be funded through a line of credit, because that's going to be, once that gets down to the point where it's a 35% reduction, you don't need it anymore. And also, Are you really going to need an authority after you meet the 35% and the 10% for the township? So this is food for thought. I'm not asking for answers. You've got a tremendous job ahead of you, and I don't envy you in your position on having to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your input. Would anybody else like to make a comment or ask a question before we take about a 5-minute break and begin our regular public meeting? Mr. Wolf, yes.
One final comment, and actually it's a need from your staff and your consultant. We have tentative dates for public outreach to begin, which can't really begin until we can provide a more definitive process that this township will follow. We're not asking you for that tonight, but we are hoping that the board can place us on the agenda for the workshop meeting next week to basically determine how it wants us to initially discuss a fee with all classes of property owners.
So we'll make an initial decision as to how to proceed, then we'll have public input, at the end of which we will either affirm or modify that decision. Because I, for one, would like to have the public input process before a final decision is
Oh,
made.
absolutely.
Otherwise, why do it? So great. Yes, we will definitely have that on the agenda for next week's workshop and proceed in a timely manner so that we can stay on the timeline of schedule that you put. Thank you very much for your presentation and taking your presentation and Mr. Wolf in making a very complex subject, I thought, very understandable. Yes, very complicated, but very understandable.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll adjourn this portion of the meeting and take a 5-minute break, and we'll begin our regular supervisors meeting. Thank you very much.
Happy birthday, Bill.
As long as I'm at 63, as long as I can get through.
Let's go. Yeah. No, it's not a conflict because it doesn't involve us personally financially. If we had a personal.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is George Wolf from Lower Paxton Township's manager, and I will briefly summarize tonight's business meeting as the supervisors conduct business. There's one item of old business, that's action on Ordinance 14 for this year, which approves a qualified interest rate management agreement. Somebody else smarter than me will explain that in a few minutes. Under new business, there is a resolution approving a transfer of a restaurant liquor license to Sheets Incorporated, now located in Lower Paxton Township at 6290 Allentown Boulevard. There is the annual resolution accepting the minimum municipal obligation for the police and non-uniformed employees' pension plans. There is action on a gift agreement between the township and Sandra Paul and Serena Burris, providing a donation to the township's Friendship Center. There is amendment number 1 to the agreement with the Heroes Grove Association. And then there is a resolution authorizing the lease of a 2019 Mack truck in accordance with a master lease agreement with ROC Leasing Incorporated. That moves us to action on a supplemental agreement between Lower Paxton Township and Herbert Rowland and Grubik for engineering and construction services in regard to the Jonestown Road Bridge project. Under subdivision and land development, we have one plan, a preliminary final subdivision and land development plan for 5700 Linglestown Road. That completes my summary of tonight's business meeting agenda. The supervisors are at the podium and ready to conduct business.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. This meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors will come to order, and I would like to ask Mr. Zumas if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
My pleasure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have before us approval of minutes from the meeting of April 10th, 2018. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of April the 10th, 2018 as prepared and circulated, dated 9/1/18.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry, Chris. Yeah.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Prior to this meeting, actually, we didn't meet to receive information because we had a meeting on stormwater, our stormwater workshop that took place. We will, however, meet after this meeting in order to discuss personnel issues. At this point, the podium is open for public comment on an item not on the agenda. Does anyone wish to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Yes, sir. Mr. Murphy.
Good evening. Joe Murphy, Lower Paxton Historical Commission. This is the week of our meeting, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to announce that Thursday night we're going to have a meeting here in this room. We're going to have a guest speaker from the State Preservation Department, and his name is Brian Van Sweden, and he's going to come and explain to us some of the things that we can do to help preserve some of the properties, and he'll be lecturing us. We also, this week, we got a chance to go into the Gilchrist House on the 15th and got to go on all the attic to the basement. We took quite a few pictures, and we got to get some dating. I've got some additional information since we were in the house from historical preservation personnel that helped us with the dating. It is much older than I first thought from what we saw. And we're going to have a small presentation this Thursday showing the pictures. We're not posting the pictures because of where the house is located. We don't want a lot of people all of a sudden ending up on the property. But we are going to show the pictures to the group at the meeting and explain some of the things that we found. But it is very interesting, especially the two fireplaces that we found in the basement, built about 50 years apart. So that's very interesting. And the big news is that one of the things George had mentioned way back last November was that maybe sometime we could get some things on Lower Paxton TV. And starting last night, Monday night at 4 o'clock, our first historical presentation about the B-29 was broadcast, and will be broadcast all month, every Monday. Every Tuesday at 4, they'll be broadcasting what we did on the Linglestown Fair and the presentation that we did. And then on Wednesday, until October 1st, they'll be broadcasting about the Running Pump Farm, which happens to be Eric's farm. It was the presentation he did on the history of the farm. So we are using the TV station, and we're letting our citizens, they can actually, I guess, They can't use their videotape anymore, but maybe they can DVR it and see it. So it's on both Verizon and on Comcast.
Do these exist anywhere else?
Yeah, they're on the website, actually. We have them on our webpage, so that they want to stream it, they can stream it there. And we also have it on our YouTube page. And
Joe,
we
what time's the meeting start on Thursday?
Thursday at 6.
6.
6 o'clock, and it should be really a fully packed meeting. And then we're going to be able to go into the House one more time. I'll be able to offer just to our commission members, and one of the state preservation people are going to go with us. And this week I'll be offering to them, any of that want to go, they'll be able to do a tour. Any township employee or volunteer can go. So if you're smiling and you want to go, Gary, let me know.
I will indeed, Joe. Thank you.
Because it's very interesting. But
Joe,
we have to have special insurance, and we have to have a letter of protecting the owner on any liability. But the house is very clean. We only saw some issues in the kitchen.
Wow.
So it's like that when they walked out in 2000.
Joe, for those who don't know, where is this located?
Gilchrist?
Yes.
Okay, it's on Linglestown Road, across the street from the Weiss Market.
Okay.
But again, it's private property. There's all signs of keep out signs, and they don't want people walking around it. But it's people have been passing it for years, not realizing it was built in the 1740s.
Wow.
So it's probably our oldest building, or one of the oldest.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate the work of the Historical Commission. Would any other member of the public like to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to chairman and board member comments. Do any members of the board have any comments this evening?
Just a reminder that September the 16th, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at George Park, we'll have the Cars, Cops, and Coffee. So it's a good time to come out and meet some of the police officers and get to see some of the really old cars in the township.
What was that date again?
That is September the 16th, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Any other board members have comments? Seeing none, Mr. Wolf, do we have any manager comments?
I have nothing for the board this evening.
Thank you. We'll then move to old business. We have before us ordinance 2018-04. This would be approving a qualified interest rate management agreement. And Mr. Smida is going to, we've discussed this at workshop, we've discussed this at last month's legislative meeting, either or, it's fine. And I assume, Mr. Smida, you have additional information for us, along with Mr. Wenger.
Yes, we have quite a bit of information tonight. Not the final information, but we're setting that up. I handed out before the meeting a newer version of ordinance number 1804, which I will walk through with you tonight, and then Mr. Wenger will walk through with you tonight the terms of the interest rate management agreement and plan that we will file with the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Mr. Smida, is this different from what we received on Friday in our packet?
Only slightly. I
Okay.
modified the paragraph that authorized who could sign on behalf of the township.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
It's a substantial,
Okay.
99.9%
Okay.
the same. Okay, so the resolution, the ordinance, I'm sorry, authorizes the entering into an interest rate management plan, which we'll discuss with you, which will relate to the Township Series D of 2009. These were the federally taxable Build America bonds. The aggregate principal amount is $42,465,000. The interest rate management plan contemplates a forward interest rate swap that will be cash settled on the day that we price this. In other words, there will be a payment to the township in an amount to be determined based on market conditions as of that moment. The ordinance sets forth requirements under the Local Government Unit Debt Act in as much as you are required to evaluate certain risks with respect to this agreement. That Jay will go through that. It's embedded into the plan. It authorizes entering in the swap with a qualified financial institution, which we have identified as being the Royal Bank of Canada, who is more than qualified to serve in that capacity. It retains Susquehanna Financial Advisors to act as your independent advisor and qualified representative as defined by the CFTC business conduct standards for the township with respect to the swap. I believe that the plan is going to be put on, or we have copies of it we can hand out.
Give me a second here, Tom.
Sure.
Go ahead. You're talking about the schedule, the draft?
It would be the plan
no.
that was attached to the ordinance, correct?
No,
Okay,
it wasn't.
I'll just pass out paper
Yeah,
copies.
those are the technical transaction documents. There's a plan which,
Not part of the
Yeah.
ordinance?
I'm sorry?
Not part of the ordinance?
It should be, but it didn't come from, Jay was putting it together. I thought it had been combined for purposes of the meeting. We have it,
Okay.
and we'll walk you through it. While we're doing that, I can continue with the discussion of the ordinance itself. You're required by the act to identify the source of your payment obligations. As we discussed, it's theoretically possible that on October 1 of 2019, you will owe a payment with respect to this transaction, in which case you are pledging your full faith and tax and credit to the source of the payment of those sums. So it's a general obligation of the township payable from the township's general revenues as opposed to a specific source of funds. We've also determined, as required by the Act, that you would be awarding the swap agreement through a private negotiated sale with the Royal Bank of Canada, as opposed to a public sale or an auction type of arrangement. We will also be receiving, as required by the Act, from your independent financial advisor, an opinion, a fairness opinion, that in their opinion, the terms of the interest rate management agreement are fair as of that moment in time. Authorizes the president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, the director of finance, or the township manager now to execute any and all documents necessary to consummate the transaction. That is really the sum and substance of the ordinance. Now we'll go through the terms of the plan itself.
As Tom mentioned, there's an interest rate management plan that we've just presented to you that will be attached as part of the ordinance for approval. It's a required document under the Local Government Unit Debt Act, and this is the document that sets forth the basic terms of the transaction, and there's a section of risks associated with the swap that we'll walk through so you have a thorough understanding of the theoretical what could go wrong in a worst-case scenario. The first page is really a summary, references Act 23 again under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. That's the section of the Debt Act that permits interest rate swaps to be a financing tool for municipalities in Pennsylvania. As your financial advisor, we've put this plan together, and not only is it required by the Local Government Unit Debt Act, but it's a great reference document to have. It has all of the details of the transaction, so you can always reference this as if you will, the book of what you did and why you did it. And so on the first page, I think it's paragraph number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The basic premise of this swap transaction is to allow the township to hedge against the potential of rising interest rates between now, the execution date, which would be sometime in September of 2018, and the call date for your 2009 D Build America bonds, which is October 1st of 2019. So essentially 1 month of interest rate risk. And as you might recall at the last meeting, we discussed interest rate outlook and the Federal Open Market Committee's continued announcement that they intend to raise short-term rates 2 times, at least 1 time, probably 2 more times in 2018, and they're forecasting 3 more rate hikes in 2019. So with that in mind, the idea is that if there are going to be 5 increases in short-term rates, that the probability that longer-term rates rise, maybe not by the same degree, but would rise is at least a meaningful probability. And so this vehicle allows the township to hedge against those rising interest rates. And so because the advance refunding doesn't generate what we would consider sufficient debt service savings to enter into today, but assuming interest rates do not change and a current refunding would generate significant savings for the township, we believe this is an appropriate vehicle for consideration. And there really are 2 reasons why the advance refunding, even though there's only a year left to the call date, doesn't work. One is any advance refunding has an embedded escrow cost, what we call a cost of carry in the escrow account, because the money gets put into an escrow account today and it's invested in short-term treasuries at, call it 1%, while your outstanding obligation is costing you about 6%. Second, and almost just as important, specific to the Build America bonds, is they are essentially taxable bonds, but you receive a subsidy from the federal government as a result of having issued those bonds at the time you issued them. The minute you issue tax-exempt refunding bonds to replace those taxable bonds, you lose the subsidy. So that's essentially 1/3 of your interest rate cost each year. So the combination of the negative carry in the escrow account and the loss of the federal subsidy makes an advance refunding non-productive in today's interest rate environment, and probably non-productive until we get to the call date. And so this allows us to hedge against rising interest rates to get us to the call date where we don't have to worry about the loss of the federal subsidy and the negative carry in the escrow account goes away. Therefore, a current refunding, all other things being equal, is much, much more productive in terms of debt service savings than an advance refunding would be today. So all of that is intended to be outlined on page 1. And I say that in detail because it's always important to be able to go back and say, okay, so why did we do this and what is the value proposition of what we did? So that's intended to be laid out for you on page 1. Page 2 then gets into a little more formatting of an interest rate management plan. At the top of page 2, you can see debt outstanding just summarizes your non-electoral debt. Again, a lot of that is not general fund debt. It's allocated to your sewer system, but nevertheless, it is debt of the township. If you enter into this interest rate swap transaction, you will have what is called a qualified interest rate management agreement, and this would be that one agreement. So there are no other swaps that you currently have. There are none other that we are contemplating, and I would be hard-pressed to tell you we would come back with another concept in the next year. But you could add interest rate management plans. They would be separate and apart from this, but you can enter into multiple transactions if you so choose. We are expecting this to be executed sometime in the next week to 2 weeks, so if you authorize it tonight, we still have some paperwork and credit review to be done by RBC as the swap provider. We hope that could be done as early as next week, but it could take a week or 2 weeks until we have all the approvals in place. At the time all the approvals in place, there will be a teleconference call for the pricing. As Tom mentioned, one of our jobs is to verify that the pricing is on market. So we have a software model that provides a current market valuation. We compare that to the swap counterparty, RBC, and assuming our number agrees with their number, we give you the recommendation to proceed with the transaction, assuming the rate is still at a level that makes sense relative to the refunding opportunity. So our risks between now and the next week or two is that interest rates would start to rise rapidly and the value proposition of this would decline accordingly. We certainly will keep you, and in particular George, apprised of interest rate movements. Since we had the first conversation, interest rates have been relatively stable, and so there has been no real change in the economic proposition since we first talked about this. Yes, Mr. Chrisman?
You anticipate.
It's level debt.
Yeah, no, I know that. No, my question, twofold. One, when you were speaking just now, dealt with right up until the end where you're comparing numbers with everybody else. If that goes out of whack, can we pull it?
Well, to the extent that we don't agree with their number.
Yes.
We certainly don't execute on the phone because I can't give you our representation that it's an on-market pricing if we don't agree.
Okay, I just
So-
wasn't sure how that
Yeah.
was working.
So
Okay.
that's another way of saying there would be no transaction until we could figure out whose model had some bug in it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we had,
Yes.
you had the final say in there when we have a discrepancy or disparity, that we can pull back if we can't reach agreement. Okay.
Up until the
I just want to make
point-
sure we have that option.
Up until the point on the telephone where you say, we agree, execute, you're not obligated to anything to anybody.
Do you assume any fiduciary responsibility?
Well, as a financial advisor, we operate under a fiduciary standard, so yes,
You do.
yes.
Jay, I know I asked this in the workshop when we talked about this, because we've never done this before. Is there any other townships that you work with that have done this?
There are some representatives from RBC in the back. They've done several of these. We are working with a county, not a township. So it takes, in our case, where we have clients that issued Build America bonds right around the time you did, and a call date that's a year or two out, we view this as a very good vehicle to protect against rising rates. It does work for some other transactions, but the Build America bonds is kind of the classic fit
So
right
we're the
now.
first township that you're doing it.
First township, yes. Yep. There are some school districts who have done it, that have done it. We're working with a county in western Pennsylvania that I think is going to do it, but they haven't executed yet.
I have another general question, if I
Yes.
may, before you go back to your presentation. Just help me understand our process here as to our process in the past, and it's probably because of the swap, and maybe I don't have all the concepts. Why Bank of Canada as opposed to our normal way?
The, so.
And
it's a
again, I
really-
just need some help in the
Yeah,
process and
that's a
understanding.
Excellent question. In Pennsylvania, there are a couple, and less than a few, I would say, financial institutions that are offering municipal interest rate swap products. Your traditional underwriter, Brennan and Scattergood, is an investment bank that underwrites bonds, buys and sells bonds. They're
Right.
not a financial institution that offers this type of product.
Okay.
Okay? So this is being offered by a bank, not an investment bank.
Thank you for that clarification, because I've been wondering off and on as we started this process. Now I have my answer. Thank you.
Yes. Continuing then on page 2, there are fees that will be paid assuming you execute, and only if you execute. They are payable by you out of general fund monies or reserves. They are outlined in Schedule 2, which we'll get to momentarily. I'll get to those in a minute. And then there also is a schedule that outlines the potential payments under the swap. That doesn't really apply here because we have a termination date that is the call date for your 2009 D Build America bonds. So this contract will be terminated on or before the call date as we settle up on interest rates. So we're not entering into this with the expectation that it's a long-term interest rate swap agreement between the township and Royal Bank of Canada. This is expected to be a 12-month contract. If we get enough movement in interest rates in the interim, meaning between now and October 1st, you have the right, and we certainly would advise you of those opportunities to terminate in advance of October 1. RBC, as the counterparty, does not have the right to terminate the contract prior to the end date, except for if you were in default, which we think is a very low probability in the next 12 months. And then there is a section of risks, which we'll get to momentarily. Again, the scheduled swap payments really are, we're going to settle this up at some point before the call date. You know, if we get some big spike in interest rates for whatever reason, and this turns to a positive value for the township, we certainly would be back to you discussing the merits of terminating prior to the call date. The Debt Act requires that we monitor this for you. So we come back, give you updates. Because it's only a one-year contract, it's going to be a fairly short monitoring period. Because we're entering into this in your fiscal year 2018, it will be an accounting entry and record in your 2018 financial statement. So on December 31st of 2018, there will be a footnote in your financial statement as well as what we call a mark-to-market valuation. So the day you enter into it, there's an interest rate, it has a value. On December 31st, at that point in time, as a picture of time, whatever the relative interest rate is, the swap will be valued either positively or negatively. So in other words, if interest rates are higher on December 31st, it will have a positive value. If interest rates are lower, it will have a negative value.
And the accountants can work it out from one
Well,
fiscal year to the next.
We provide the value, we give them what it's worth, but they'll provide you with the accounting entry.
Okay.
Schedule 1 then on the next page just literally maps out your existing debt. And again, the transaction that this would be applied to is in the first column, right of the dates, and that is the Series D of 2009, which were Build America bonds, outstanding currently in the amount of $42,465,000. The next page, as I mentioned earlier, there are fees. We had mentioned to you in response to a question at the last meeting, we thought the fees would be in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, and it's $50,000. There is a fee embedded in the swap pricing by the counterparty, so that's in the paragraph in the middle of the page. That equates to what we call 5 basis points, which is $250,000. So another way to look at that is that's RBC's profit in the transaction. There are no fees at the time you terminate.
So Jay, you're saying 50,000 and then an approximately 200 in additional.
Well, the 50,000 are the fees that you pay out of pocket.
Right.
The 250,000 is embedded in the swap rate, so you don't pay that other than to say, let's just say the market rate is 3%. Effectively, it becomes 3.05 because of their markup in the transaction. So while you don't pay it, it has an economic cost to you.
And we're doing this to save approximately how much money?
Oh, shoot, I didn't bring that with me. It's in excess of $1 million.
Of what?
In excess of $1 million. Do you have the original?
Yes.
Just give us a second. We'll go back over it. Keep going.
Correct.
If we did the advance refunding today, the savings would be a little over $900,000. Assuming interest rates do not change at the call date, the savings are approximately $2.7 million. So the benefit that we are trying to protect is the difference between $900,000 and $2.7 million, approximately $1.7 million.
But you have 300,000. I know you're saying we don't have to do the 250, but if you add that, you're talking 300,000 in expenses.
Yeah, the 2 points, yes, that's correct, yes.
So you're saying if we save, you're saying $1 million and that's 300, so it's only 700,000?
No, it's more, it's about $1.7 million, so if you net out
$1.7
all the fees, it's $1.4 million.
$1.4 million, okay.
Now, you ask a good question, and you certainly should be sensitive to that. When we get to the sensitivity of the refunding, I think you'll see the value proposition a little more clearly. And if we turn to page 3, or Schedule 3, rather, on the next page, so one of the things we do is look at what happens when interest rates change to the value of the swap. And all of these are valued on the call date, which is October 1st. So the 1, 2, 3, fifth line, I think that is down, is 0% change. So there is where the $250,000 is recognized as a cost. The termination value would be $398,000, so they become offsets to the refunding savings. If rates go up by just 25 basis points, the swap termination value is a positive 620. If it goes up by 50 basis points, it's $1.6 million, and so on. You'll see when we get to the last schedule that it doesn't take much of a change in interest rates to where the refunding savings disappear entirely, and the only value you'll get is out of the swap transaction. So you are spending a little bit of money to protect the value proposition that exists if interest rates don't change. Your real risk in this is that interest rates fall from current levels, and I'm not here to tell you I know they're going up or down. The expectation is they're going up, but it certainly does not prohibit or preclude interest rates from declining for whatever reason, and you can create any number of economic environments or scenarios where interest rates could drop for a number of reasons that would be a long, long conversation, and we could just argue about who's right. But again, this is the sensitivity of interest rate changes to the value of the transaction. Schedule 4 then is a discussion on risks, and there are several. We think they are properly understood and properly managed and mitigated in this process by nature of the transaction, but worthy of going through those. The first one is counterparty risk. And so if RBC were to default, it is possible that you would not have another side of your contract. It's unlikely that that would happen. The contract would likely be assumed by somebody. For example, in the last financial crisis and recession, very few swap contracts actually failed. They were sold or were assigned to another counterparty. And so your real risk in that is that you're now dealing with somebody you didn't enter into in September of 2018. The likelihood of a default, we think, is slight. You're a AA rated entity, as is RBC. So there is a lot of room for credit deterioration in a short period of time, meaning 12 months, before credit default would be a problem on either side of the transaction. Termination risk, again, you hold the right to terminate this at your option at any time. So if for whatever reason there were a better mousetrap, if you will, or as a board you just decided you don't want to have it on the books, you can terminate it. It is subject to market conditions. So while we tell you you can terminate it, we certainly want you to look at this as a swap that you would hold for up to a year as, again, a hedge against rising interest rates, as opposed to, well, in a couple of months, if I change my mind, I'll just get out. Third is interest rate risk. Again, the value of this transaction is intended to protect you against rising rates. If interest rates were to decrease, you would have been better off doing nothing. And so while there is not the traditional interest rate risk of rates rising, here the risk to you is that rates decline. Again, we mentioned this at the last meeting. In a perfect world, rates would spike really quickly. You could terminate at a profit, and then you would wait to do the refunding at some point in the future, but that would be the perfect world. Number 4 is tax risk, and again, we think this is a very slight risk over the next 12 months for 2 reasons. One, Congress doesn't change the tax code often. They just did to start 2018, so the likelihood that there would be a significant overhaul of the tax code between now and October of 2019 we think is remote. They just don't mobilize or move or act that quickly. And the risk here is that the tax code would be overhauled and the value of tax-exempt bonds to investors would be taken away entirely. And if that were to take place, your ability to issue refunding bonds and produce savings at the call date would be slight. The only value left in this would be the value of terminating the swap if rates went higher. Number 5 is market access risk. Again, the risk here is that you've entered into a transaction with the expectation you would terminate it and issue bonds. In the worst case, if that termination were negative to you and you were going to fund it with the issuance of bonds, but for whatever reason the markets were not functioning, you could not access the markets, you obviously would have an obligation to pay with no source of funding for that. We think that's a slight risk given you're a AA credit, but October of 2008 taught us a lot of things about slight risk, so it is a risk. And then last is cost of issuance. We've covered those. There are transaction costs in this, so like most things, nothing is free. The last page of this, I think, will give you some comfort in the value proposition, but that certainly is for you to decide. Our goal is to help you manage your debt portfolio and your interest rate risk. We think this is a useful tool to do so. It's not free. RBC expects to make money in the process. The term of the contract we expect to be no more than 12 months, could be less than that depending on market conditions. So by way of carrying forward administrative costs of monitoring a swap, it's really going to be, as part of your 2018 financial statement, there will be what's called a GASB 53 report that we'll provide that the auditors will need in order to complete their entry in your financial statement.
Okay, Jay, we've
yes.
sort of been over this like 3 times now, so can we sort of move it along a little bit?
We can now. Tom
Yeah.
was insisting I covered that in detail.
Yeah.
So it's Schedule 5, the last page, I'll skip to, and again, this is really the economics of the transaction. So what's added in this that you didn't see on the prior schedule of termination values is the refunding value. So you can see in any rate environment, you make money net of the swap termination cost or benefit. So if interest rates rise and the refunding goes away, we would not do the refunding, but you would terminate the swap at a profit. If interest rates decrease, you will have given up some refunding value, but it still is a very viable refunding transaction if interest rates decline at the call date. And I apologize for being lengthy.
Yeah.
Tom was
Well,
gonna
we
kick
went
me if I
over it
didn't.
twice before, so this is sort of, although I understand the importance of this, but do we have any additional questions here?
There are a couple of documents generated by RBC that will require signature of the township. They have not finalized their credit approval, so my suggestion would be, if you want to execute this tonight, approve the ordinance and execute the documents, that we would give the signature pages to Tom to hold in escrow until they're ready to execute.
Any question or comments from the board? Are we prepared? Did you have a question?
No, I want you to say again what you already said before I even asked the question. It does fit into our level debt service.
We are not altering your debt by $1.
Thank you.
And Jay, I guess
Anybody
real quick, just because you haven't done these with any other township, is that more or less because these are particular bonds, Build America, that were offered in 2000? They haven't existed for a long time?
The Build America bonds are the perfect fit because of the tax subsidy that you lose if you issue refunding bonds.
And they didn't
in advance
exist
of the
prior
call
to
date.
2009?
They were, the Build America bonds
Post-recession.
were introduced to aid municipalities in the midst of a financial crisis where issuing tax exempt bonds was difficult.
Yeah, so there's not a long history of
No.
these particular ones? Okay.
No.
Would anybody care to make a motion one way or the other on whether or not to approve ordinance 2018-04?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve ordinance 2018-04, approving a qualified interest rate management agreement, and I'm also going to include the interest rate management plan as presented. I think the two documents should go hand in hand and should be memorialized together.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. Any additional questions or comments from the board? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Ordinance is approved. Gentlemen, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you.
Yes.
So- That takes us to new business, and we have before us Resolution 2018-35, approving the transfer of a restaurant liquor license to Sheetz, Inc. This is for the Sheetz located at 6290 Allentown Boulevard. Mr. Wolf and Mr. Stein. Sorry. Mr. Stein, since Mr. Wolf is.
Well, I'm only here to do the public hearing, so I don't know if George, I didn't know if George wanted to do an introduction or not.
We are still in the process of handling a bond swap. So that's
I think I'll start the public hearing.
very good.
Okay.
Okay,
All
maybe
right,
we can
thanks.
hand out some papers here.
It's time and date set for the public hearing on Resolution 18-35, which would approve the transfer of a restaurant liquor license from the city of Harrisburg into Lower Paxton Township for the use of Sheetz, Inc. at 6290 Allentown Boulevard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolf, Mr. Stein has opened the public hearing while you were at sidebar.
I
So,
am sorry, board members, this is
and I used the word sidebar in a different way relative to this topic.
This is an application for a restaurant liquor license transferred into Lower Paxton Township to be used at the Sheetz facility at 2690 Allentown Boulevard. Board members, I am sure familiar with the property. The site plan for the property has been distributed by the applicant. as well as a presentation that the applicant has before you this evening. Board members, you are familiar with this process, at least most of you are, in that you've done restaurant liquor license transfers to at least 2 supermarkets and 1 other Sheetz in Lower Paxton Township. So with that, I'm going to let the applicant proceed.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kozar. It's my pleasure to be back here again. I think I did all those intermunicipal transfers that Mr. Wolf mentioned.
Could you hold on for just
Sure.
1 second? I want to make sure that we have everybody's full attention when you speak. I believe there's some immediate paperwork relative to a previous motion that has to be accomplished, which is the nature of why we're having a few sidebars again
That's
here.
fine, Mr. Chairman.
So if you could indulge us for just a couple of minutes, and I want to make sure that everybody hears what you have to say.
We'll remove ourselves to another room.
You will remove yourselves from, thank you,
We
sir.
have a court stenographer here, so we'll go to another room. You have a court stenographer here, so the minutes won't be lacking, and Shelley and I and Mr. can
Okay.
do the...
I do understand the urgent nature of, the timely nature of what you need to do.
George, you're not really going home, are you?
He is retired, you know.
That's why I asked that question.
Okay, my apologies. Please proceed.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Mark Kozar. I'm with the law firm of Flaherty and O'Hara. I always like to plug our firm whenever I get to these hearings. Our sole area of practice is liquor law and liquor licensing. I believe I did probably 2 or 3 of the intermunicipals that Mr. Wolf mentioned earlier. I'm here to ask that Lower Paxton Township pass a resolution permitting the intermunicipal transfer of a liquor license from outside the township to within it pursuant to the revised liquor code, Title 47, Section 461B3 for use at the Sheetz store at 2690 Allentown Boulevard. As you are aware, the liquor code was amended in 2002. It now permits the PLCB to approve the transfer of a liquor license from any municipality in Dauphin County to any other municipality, so long as you, the receiving municipality, issues a resolution permitting that transfer. In order for you to make a decision on our request, let me give you a little bit of background on Sheetz. Sheetz was founded in 1952 with a single store in Altoona. Since that time, Sheetz has grown to over 600 stores in 6 states. Over 325 of these stores sell beer, including 89 stores here in Pennsylvania. The PLCB has pending before them 31 other applications for Sheetz liquor licenses. The store here in Lower Paxton will be remodeled to add a sit-down seating area for 30, and accordingly the store will qualify for a restaurant liquor license under the liquor code. If you look at the floor plans that I gave you, you can see that there'll be a bump out on the front part of the store. That is this part of the store that faces Route 22, and they'll be turning the cooler in the left-hand corner into what they call a beer cave. What we're asking is nothing new or unusual. Over the last 11 years, the PLCB has approved licenses for approximately 700 grocery store and convenience store restaurants. As I said, once the seating is put in, this store will qualify for a restaurant liquor license under the liquor code, which requires a minimum of 400 square feet, seating for 30, and food for 30. All beer on the premises will be located in walk-in cooler, not displayed on the floors or on the shelves. Sheetz will carry approximately 150 different kinds of beer, including national brands and the popular craft beers. All beer must be paid for at a designated cash register. All on-premise beer consumption will be limited to the seating area. There will be no outdoor beer consumption permitted. Although the store is open 24/7, beer sales will be limited from 7 a.m. until the beer cooler is locked at 1:45 a.m. on Mondays through Saturdays. Sunday beer sales will start at 9 a.m. Sheetz will be applying for what's called a wine expanded permit. This permits restaurant and hotel licensees to sell up to 4 bottles of wine unopened to go. Wine sales must statutorily stop at 11 p.m. every day. Sheetz has a comprehensive responsible alcohol management program in place. First, all Sheetz employees receive the Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement developed RAMP training, which stands for Responsible Alcohol Management Program. This program teaches people how to recognize fake IDs, recognize visibly intoxicated persons, recognize pass-off situations where someone who's 21 is purchasing beer for somebody who is not 21. Second, all Sheetz employees receive their internally developed computer-based alcohol management program. Third, Sheetz has a 100% carding policy. Every person that tries to buy beer or wine will be carded. Sheetz uses a card scanner, which is connected electronically to their cash register. If somebody hands over a fake ID and it's swiped through, it'll show up in the cash register as a no sale. In addition, if you go in and your PA driver's license happened to be expired, as happened to me, it shows up as a no sale, and they won't sell you a beer.
Oops.
I walked out empty-handed. In addition, Sheetz has a unique policy, unlike any of our other clients, in that if more than one person shows up at the cash register about a 6-pack of beer, they card anybody in the group. For instance, if there were 3 people in the group, they would card all 3 people, and if any one of those 3 people was under 21, they don't make the sale of beer. As a matter of fact, they make a written record of that the attempted sale, and they also tag their security cameras to keep that section of the security camera to go with the written report. Sheetz would prefer not to sell beer for on-premise consumption, but I have to make an admission against interest. Back in 2007, we lost a case in the state Supreme Court because we said we weren't going to sell beer for on-premise consumption. The Malt Beverage Distributors Association took us to court over that and ended up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, the way we read the statute is if you're going to sell beer to go, you have to at least offer beer for on-premise consumption. So we at least make it available, although we make it, we discourage it. And the way we discourage it is there's a 2-beer limit for on-premise consumption. There's a limited selection of single-serve beers that can be consumed on the premises. Sheetz doesn't have any happy hours. They don't have any daily specials, those type of things. We do everything in our power to discourage on-premise consumption. In addition to the employee training and the 100% carding, each Sheetz store has approximately 30 video cameras inside and out. Once this is approved, there will be a camera in what will be the beer cave, a camera on the door to the beer cave. There are cameras that cover the cash registers and all the doors. Pretty much every inch of the store is covered by a video camera, with the exception, obviously, of the restrooms. These cameras, in addition to be monitored by the employees there at the store, they are monitored in Altoona at a big old warehouse where their security operations center is located. And if you notice in Sheetz stores, all the employees have a little earbud, and they can communicate with the securities operations center with the press of a button. And when they press that button, the security operations center brings up the camera that shows that particular employee in that particular store, and they can talk down to the employee and say, do you have an issue? What is your issue? Let's walk through this. Let's see if we can't resolve this. So that in addition to on-site security, there's off-site security that watches the stores 24/7. As a matter of fact, the SOC checks in with every store, all 600 stores, every morning and every evening. They check in with the store people, say, okay, is everything okay? Do you have any issues? Anything we should be concerned about? In addition, the SOC stores their video images for up to 7 years, and Sheetz routinely provides local police departments with videos in the event of criminal activity in the store or on Sheetz property, or if the video camera happens to take in an intersection where there was an incident, they're more than happy to provide that type of video taped to the local police department. This isn't a place where people are going to come to hang out and drink. There's a 2-beer limit, there's no video games, there's no pool tables or jukeboxes, the types of things that keep people at a place drinking. It is a well-lit, safe, and secure place where customers can purchase prepared food, a 6-pack of beer, or a bottle of wine to take home. And that is exactly what Sheetz' business plan is. Sheetz is a responsible owner that has made a significant investment in Lower Paxton Township that they will protect by responsible management and well-trained employees. For those reasons, we ask that you pass a resolution permitting the transfer of the liquor license into Lower Paxton for use at the Sheetz store on Allentown Boulevard. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
I just had a question. We have 3 Sheetz stores in Lower Paxton. What made you choose the Allentown Boulevard one? I shouldn't say you, but the company. I'm sorry, the company.
I quite frankly, I have no input on that.
Okay. Is there anybody here from Sheetz that can?
No. I don't know how they make their determination, other than I know their plans are eventually to have all their stores in the state licensed.
And I have a question for the police officer. We had approved the 3 grocery stores and a pizza shop in our area. Have we had any issues since we've approved the liquor license coming into those facilities?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Had very few issues. And Sheetz, just to go on Sheetz, their camera systems, they help us out a lot.
Okay, good.
Very, very good camera system.
Okay.
Very helpful.
That's good to know. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the board?
Yes, I do. You have indicated, you didn't give me a percentage or a number, but the employees that are internally trained to monitor for drinking in the store, can you tell me what that is?
The percentage of employees? 100%.
100%. Only the reason I'm asking the question is because there is a state mandate that requires a certain percentage of the employees to be certified and trained for that purpose. I want to make sure that you're in compliance.
And actually, there's been 2 changes in the law over the last 4 or 5 years. About 5 years ago, the liquor code was amended so that all store managers, licensed managers, have to receive what's called manager owner operator training. 2 years ago, Act 39 was passed by the legislature, and that required all new employees at a licensed premises had to be ramp server trained within 180 days. Now, the percentage you're talking about has to do with what's called ramp certification.
Yes.
If a restaurant's going to be ramp certified.
I was aware of what you had just spoken of. I want to go beyond that and find out what your organization is planning to do.
100%.
Okay.
And because they get wine expanded permits, which was part of Act 39.
Correct.
When you get a wine expanded permit, your restaurant must be ramp certified, which means at least 50% of your service staff must be ramp trained, server trained.
Yes.
Sheetz has a 100% ramp training policy.
That's an excellent response.
So they'll train everybody even though they hire at 16, and they will not be able to serve at 16. You have to be 18
That's correct. Only people that are 18 and older will be ramp trained.
Okay, so it's not going to be 100% of the employees. It'll just be 18 and older.
18 and older.
Okay.
Does this location have any sit-down eating currently?
No, that's why they're going to bump it out to put in the seating area.
All for the purpose mainly of being able to sell.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And you got to get a restaurant license.
A restaurant liquor license, correct.
All this just to be able to sell beer and wine.
Correct.
So the food they'll be eating there will be coming from the other part of the restaurant where they're order.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, does anyone in the audience wish to be heard on Resolution 18-35? Seeing no response, Mr. Chairman, it would be in order at this time to close the public hearing on Resolution 18-35, and the board may take action if it so desires.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. We have before us Resolution 1835, approving the transfer of a restaurant liquor license to Sheets Inc. at 6290 Allentown Boulevard. Would any member of the board care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-35, approving the transfer of the restaurant liquor license to Sheets Inc. at 6290 Allentown Boulevard as presented.
So moved. Is there a second?
I second that.
Has been moved and seconded. Any additional comments by the board? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, the resolution is approved. I did note in stopping at a Sheets in Western Pennsylvania a couple of months ago, some of our local wines were on sale at Sheets that were produced here in Lower Paxton Township. So we're pleased you're using local products.
Just a comment on that. The legislature sometimes doesn't know what they're doing.
Sometimes.
I'm trying to be generous. When they passed the wine expanded permit law as part of Act 39 of 2016, the renewal for the license was based on a percentage of the amount of wine you purchased from the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board.
Oh, I see.
And because wineries can sell directly to retailers, when retailers buy Pennsylvania wine, it doesn't count on their renewal for their renewal. And actually, almost all of our clients carry a lot of PA wine, and it actually sells very well, which I'm happy to see.
Well, if we knew anybody involved with the legislature around here, maybe we could get some changes, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
But you have to have a driver's license in order to purchase it, right?
Yes.
It's some form of ID that's acceptable.
Okay, we also will move on then to Resolution 1837, accepting the minimum municipal obligations for police and non-uniformed employee pension plans. And this impacts the 2019 budget, Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, this is part of your 2019 budget preparation. You are required to act on such a resolution by the end of September. Your actuary has provided you with the minimum municipal obligation calculations for both pension plans. For the police pension plan, the minimum municipal obligation is $1,353,346. For the non-uniform plan, the minimum municipal obligation is $754,954. For budgetary purposes, we have to put those two numbers together, and that's a total obligation of $2,108,300. That amount is after employee contributions of almost $400,000, and it's before the 2018-2019 expected state aid, which will be budgeted at slightly less than $1 million at $915,000. The total expected cost to the township for 2019 will be $1,193,300. That's the municipal obligation after state aid is received. So board members, I ask that you act upon these two resolutions accepting the minimum municipal obligation. The total amount that the township is responsible for is $2,108,300, and the expected state aid is $915,000, making the net obligation of approximately $1,193,300.
Mr. Wolf, this would reflect our decision earlier in the year to increase our contribution to this fund?
You are now using the 2017 actuarial valuations, which contain those required payments in the municipal obligation. When you did this previously, at the end of last year, you were still using 2015 actuarial evaluation, and that didn't include the additional costs which are now included in the 17 document.
Very good. Thank you. Any board questions or comments? Any member of the public wish to address the board on this issue? Seeing no public comment, the chair would now accept a motion on Resolution 1837.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-37, accepting the minimum municipal obligations for the police and non-uniform employees' pension plans as outlined by Mr. Wolf, so I do not have to repeat all the numbers.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Lindsay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? We also then will move on to item C under new business, which is action on a gift agreement between the township and Sandra Prawl and Serena Burris, and they wish to provide a donation to the Friendship Center. Mr. Wolf, I assume we're willing to accept the donation to the Friendship Center.
Board members, we are. It's conditioned in two parts. The donation of $23,000 will be made over a 4-year period of time, and it's specifically slotted or to be allocated to rehabilitation of the Friendship Center Natatorium water slide, which, as you are aware, is a subject of a recent local share gaming grant application by Lower Paxton Township. And in fact, this contribution, which has been expected, has been used as a part of the match that Lower Paxton Township claims it will provide as part of that grant application. I ask that the board accept this gift and by this agreement this evening. Mr. Stein, I believe, has reviewed the agreement.
And I assume, Mr. Stein, all is in place?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from the board?
Nope, saves my question.
Any questions or comments from the public? If not, do we have a motion to take action on the gift agreement?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the gift agreement between the township and Sandy Prawl and her sister Serena Burris, providing the donation of $23,000 to the Friendship Center.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So approved.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yes,
Wolf, will there
thank
be
you.
thank you notes?
And I trust that there will be a follow-up.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
have. We're in detailed conversation because they also, because you've adopted this and we've submitted the grant application, they owe us the first payment.
Oh, yay.
So there'll be a thank you note, and
Thank
by
you,
the
yeah.
way.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we do wish to express our appreciation. Item D under new business is amendment number 1 to the Heroes Grove Amendment. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, we have correspondence from the Heroes Grove organization requesting a reduction in the annual maintenance contribution that the Heroes Grove organization previously agreed to. They're basing the reduction request upon the fact that the facilities that were originally intended to be built have not yet been built and may not be built as we move into the future. Although Heroes Grove itself is a fine functional facility and there is a phase 2, the total project is, as it was envisioned several years ago, is still even more than the phase 1 and phase 2 we're talking about. As such, the organization is requesting that their annual contribution be reduced from $3,000 to $1,000, and that the total maintenance fund contribution from Heroes Fund, Inc. be reduced from $90,000 to $30,000. That document has been prepared and is in your packet for discussion this evening.
Mr. Wolf, I did do some
Oh,
research.
and I'm sorry, Mrs. Lindsay had asked me earlier in regard to board member participation on Heroes Grove and whether or not there was any concern by board members at the township also being part and party to Heroes Grove organization discussions. I asked Mr. Stein to look into that issue.
Which I did. The crux of the issue is really, is a nonprofit organization considered a business under the Ethics Act? Even though when you look at the definition, it doesn't seem like it would be. Back in 2009, the PA Supreme Court says that a nonprofit organization is in fact a business, as it was written under the Ethics Act. So to the extent that any board members, Board of Supervisors members would also be members of the board of the organization, there is a chance that there's a conflict of interest. One exception to that would be if the amount is de minimis. In other words, if you compare the amount that they are not going to be providing under this agreement to the amount of the township general fund budget, those numbers are drastically different. And that could be a position that the board takes. It's a de minimis amount, so there actually is no conflict, because that's a specific exception. However, if you don't want to go that direction, what you could do is that statements would have to be prepared for anybody who serves on that board in order to vote. In other words, you could prepare a statement stating what the conflict is and explaining it, and then after that's submitted into the record, any of the board members that are also on that board could then vote, and it's lawful. But I just wanted to explain that process a little bit before we went any further, so you can ponder how you want to go about that.
So we would have to have that statement prepared prior to a vote occurring.
That's correct.
Is there any difference between an officer and just a board member?
There isn't.
And that applies even though none of the members of Heroes Grove have any financial compensation or benefit financially in any way from the organization?
That is correct.
Huh. Well, I suppose we're going to have to delay a vote on this because it would take 3 votes for it to be passed, and 3 members of this board sit on the Heroes Grove board.
Okay.
So you're saying that if we prepare these statements and sign them, that would then allow us to proceed to vote
Yes.
without it being a conflict of
Yeah,
interest?
because otherwise it's impossible to come to a decision.
Well, yes.
Because you only had 2 members who were not members of the board. So yes.
Okay. Well, then we will table the,
Just withdraw from the agenda.
yeah, well, probably need a motion to table.
Yes.
Would somebody, well, can we even vote on a motion to table?
Sure.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to table Amendment 1 to the Heroes Grove Agreement?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we table amendment number 1 to the Heroes Grove Agreement from tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll hold that over and prepare said documents?
Yes.
Okay.
That's easy.
And then we
And I
can,
can do all of them because they're all going to be basically the same.
the base is the same. And would we be able to do that next week or the following week?
Probably next week.
Okay.
Should work.
Okay, very good. Because there is a Heroes Grove meeting
Next Monday.
so we'd want to be able to explain what has occurred and why. So,
Thank you for researching that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised by the outcome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because because the definition of business, what it says at the end, it has clarification language at the end, that the Supreme Court said only applied to the last item in the whole list of items that was applicable to. So it didn't apply to the other organizations that were listed. So, which made all those other organizations a business.
Wow.
But it's very, very odd, but it's what it is.
Yeah, I always thought the metric was whether or not you had a personal financial stake, one way or another, in it.
Doesn't have to be. You can just be a board member without a financial stake.
Interesting. Well, thank you for looking into that.
You're welcome.
All right, that being the case, we will then move on to item E, Resolution 2018-38, which would authorize the lease of a 2019 Mack truck in accordance with the master lease agreement with Rock Leasing LLC. Mr. Wolf.
Board members, the Mack truck in question possesses a CoStar's truck price of $119,974 plus an upfit price of $73,665. That upfit includes a stainless steel body, hoist, hydraulics, plow, and spreader. Total cost is $193,639. The lease is for a 4-year term at 4.45%. with a total lease payments of $211,508.04. Board members, it's staff's recommendation that the board authorize the lease of the reference piece of equipment.
I just had a question. Is this part of the enterprise
No.
leasing? No, so this is totally
No,
separate.
anything above a Ford, was it 350 or 450 is outside of
The
that program.
enterprise, okay.
George, where is ROC located?
They're in Somerset. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The upfit company is in Somerset. ROC Leasing, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Master lease agreement. New York, Fairport, New York.
Thank you.
Any additional board member questions? Any comments or questions from the audience? If not, we'll entertain a motion on Resolution 2018-38.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-38, which authorizes the lease of a 2019 Mack truck in accordance with the master lease agreement with ROC Leasing LLC, as presented by Mr. Wolf.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Lindsay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed. New business, item F, action on a supplemental agreement with HRG Inc. for the Jonestown Road Bridge project. Again, Mr. Wolf.
Board members, this is for engineering, design, and inspection services for the ongoing project. The request is for a change order amount for additional services in the amount of $18,939.04. Taking the total agreement amount to $396,272.77. Board members, as you are aware, this is an 80% federal, 15% state, 5% local bridge project. Our total cost of the $18,939.04 is 5%, which we split 50-50 with West Hanover Township.
Okay. Any board member questions or comments?
Are we still looking at November for that bridge to open?
As far as I know, it's completely on schedule.
Okay, good, okay.
Very good. Any additional questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? If not, may we have a motion taking action on the supplemental agreement with HRG Inc. for the Jonestown Road Bridge project?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the supplemental agreement with HRG Inc. for the Jonestown Road Bridge project, being increased from $377,333.73 to an amount not to exceed $396,272.77 as presented.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Zumas. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? That now takes us to item G, subdivision and land development. We do have a preliminary and final subdivision and land development plan for 5700 Linglestown Road. Mr. Wolf?
Yes, board
yep,
members.
we do have somebody here to speak to that.
Yes, I was hoping to put the plan up here. Give me a quick second. I thought I had.
Somebody who's been sitting very patiently for a very long period of time. Thank you.
That's okay.
No, it's not there. The plan isn't there. Where's my picture?
I was gonna say, I don't think we
Okay.
We are.
Okay. That should be refreshed. There it is. Okay. Thank you, Shelley. Board members, the plan before you tonight is to, and it takes a little bit of description, but it's, this building in what is the rear of looks like the rear of a property on Linglestown Road. This building is currently occupied by a tractor-trailer training, driver training facility. It's proposed to be converted into a storage facility and added onto. So this is the building we're talking about. And I wanted to show you that before I showed you the site layout plan, because from the site layout plan, if you hadn't seen the picture in advance, you really wouldn't know that this is the two buildings, and this is the building addition that you're talking about, and this is the building that's in front of the ones that we're talking about. So that's just a kind of a frame of reference, board members. This subdivision and land development plan, I'm waiting for my computer. Is for 5700 Linglestown Road. It proposes to redevelop a 2.87 acre parcel of ground that's in the business campus zoning district. The current warehouse facility that's on the parcel is a pre-existing non-conforming use, and the redevelopment is to go to a self-storage facility, which would be the expansion of that non-conforming use. The applicant has received a special exception from the zoning hearing board in March of this year to allow for that expansion. The building expansion will add 2,800 square feet to the existing floor area of 1,800 square feet, and the total project, when done, will be 46,800 square feet and 400 total storage units. Plan has been reviewed by the Township Planning Commission in August of this year and they recommend approval. There are 3 administrative comments and 3 general comments, and the applicant is before you this evening to answer any questions and do a plan summary.
Thank you. Please give us your name and then.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Joe Liparella. I'm with Civil and Environmental Consultants. We were the civil engineers for the project. Unfortunately, a representative from the applicant, Brett Russell, could not be here tonight, but I can do my best to answer questions about the building use itself. But I can field, technical comments, questions about the engineering plan as well. As Mr. Wolf mentioned, we're proposing to convert and expand the existing warehouse facility into a self-storage facility. We are modifying the existing parking lot and asphalt paving to accommodate the vehicles that are pretty common in self-storage facilities, passenger vehicles, box trucks, and even the occasional moving truck, the larger moving trucks that could frequent the site at any time. There's an existing stormwater detention facility on site that we are proposing to use for our development for our runoff rates and volumes. And the existing building is served by public utilities. There's going to be a reduction in the amount of use that the utility demand will see from the original warehousing facility to the self-storage. There's a significant reduction in employees. There could be 1 to 2 employees at this site, so the utility demands are going to be reduced from the existing site. And we are proposing to add a landscape screen to the east side of the property. The property boundary that abuts the residential housing. That was all part of our subdivision and land development approvals from the Planning Commission. And I guess just a schedule update, we got all the comments reviewed and accepted from the Township Engineer, HRG. We are administratively complete for our NPDES permit. We're awaiting our first round of technical comments from that, and we're here before you tonight requesting approval for the land development plan.
Has the lighting situation been addressed as to how it may affect residential housing in the area?
Yeah, we prepared a photometric plan that is accepted in accordance with the SALDO, and it's been reviewed and approved. There's, we're proposing to use LED lights. There's going to be some wall-mounted lights and 3 site light poles on site. I believe that during off hours they're going to be significantly reduced, or if not turned off. So
I assume there's some type of a security system.
Yeah.
Is that like a silent alarm of sort?
I can't really speak for exactly what the security system is. I know that there is going to be security at the facility. I know the applicant has not finalized the end user yet, so I'm sure whatever operator of the facility has their own security system.
Can they access the facility 24/7?
No, again, let's see here. Tentatively, the customer access will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
And there will be someone at the facility working the front desk from approximately 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
And how many units?
It's up to 400 units.
Ooh, wow. That's
And they're all internal. There's not going to be any external storage.
Oh, so you won't be able to access it from the outside. You'd have to go inside.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Well, they'll be loading doors and entry doors to the facility, but it's not. There's no external storage areas.
Okay, so people won't be storing boats or trailers or anything outside
No,
then?
they won't.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Mr. Christie?
Yes. I heard you say, make a few comments. I need some clarification because I need to be memorialized. Since I heard you say you are not the applicant,
That's correct.
my question to you is, are you authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant and make commitments for the applicant?
I wouldn't say I'd be able to make commitments, but we can take them. Maybe we can take them as a comment.
Okay, I have a series of questions based on the information that shares with the special exceptions, the administrative comments from HRG. You're going to need to be able to respond and make commitments to those. If you're unable to do so, obviously I can't support this. Because this has to be a commitment from you, the applicant, and you, for which you're not, or the authorized representative who can speak on behalf of the applicant, guaranteeing these things either have been accomplished or will be accomplished in a timely fashion acceptable to the township staff. And I'm not putting you in an awkward position, it's just, it has to be certain, both by the applicant and this board who takes action on that these things will be accomplished. If you're unable to do so, then I'm going to suggest that you withdraw your request tonight, have it placed back on the agenda with the person who is either the applicant or the authorized person to speak on behalf of the applicant and make such commitments.
Can I?
Sorry to put you in an awkward position.
I mean,
it's for protection both for the applicant and for this board.
Yeah.
Why is the applicant not here?
He's the applicant. The Mike Kennedy is the agent, I guess, for Brett-Russell Inc. is the developer.
Mm-hmm.
He is at a national real estate conference right now in Las Vegas. Excuse me. So unfortunately, he was okay. He allowed me to come and speak on behalf of him. Now, if I would like to say I can speak on his behalf.
Do you want to go out and make a phone call?
Well, do you know what he's referring to specifically?
I do not.
He's referring to the, I guess, the administrative comments.
Well, the bottom line, though, is are you authorized by the applicant to speak on their behalf and make legal commitments on their behalf? And your hesitancy tells me that either the answer is no or you're not sure. So My recommendation would be that under the circumstance, we table this. We could put it on the agenda for next week to not hold you up long, but the applicant or an authorized individual representing the applicant needs to be here. I mean, you've certainly, very credibly answered questions relative to the plan, which is what you do, but not having the applicant here is a problem.
I can try to get a hold of them right now, but again, like I said, we were the engineers on the project. If this has to do with legal issues and other commitments, I've honestly never encountered this before. So,
And we understand that. We just don't want to put you in an awkward position to make legal commitments. So if, Mr. Chairman,
I think we should table till.
That's fine.
We should table it tonight, and if possible for the applicant to be here next week, we can put it on next week's agenda. We have a meeting next Tuesday, and we have a meeting the following Tuesday.
I was going to say, if he wanted to try and call, we could go on to the next two.
Well, we can.
No, and-
However,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't care what we do.
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Stein, whether we can take somebody making a call as definitive.
Well,
He is in Vegas, so.
Right, yeah. I mean, again, you have to understand this is not a required procedure.
Oh, it
but
isn't?
No, it's not. They already have, all he's doing is confirming that the comment letter that they received, that has all the different comments on it, that they're gonna do all those things. That's really what it's for. That he's read the comments and he understands them, and he's committing on behalf of the applicant that yes, they either have already done these things or they're going to do them to the township's satisfaction.
Are you capable of agreeing to that?
yes, we do not have any issues with addressing anything in this packet with the administrative, the general comments, or anything from
That's
HRG.
exactly, I
from-
think, what Mr. Chrisman was seeking, that
But that meets our legal requirements, Mr. Stein.
There are no legal requirements.
There are no legal requirements.
Yes, it does.
So
meet-
it's basically just a policy of ours.
Correct.
That we
That's right.
we're crossing Ts and dotting Is twice just to be sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do not have any issues addressing anything in this,
Okay.
in the comments.
That being the case, Mr. Chrisman, do you have any additional questions?
Only to ask him the questions that would be memorialized. Are you ready for the questions?
Sure.
Okay. Question number one, first of all, do you have the document in front of you?
The comment letter.
Oh, yes.
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 Okay. On the zoning approval, you see that there is a special exception that's been granted with the comment that after the non-conforming use may be changed to a different non-conforming use, if approved by a special exception zoning hearing board. You're in agreement with that?
Yes.
That was already approved.
Right. But again, I'm just trying to get an approbation of the question. The three administrative comments, either they have been completed or they will be completed in a timely fashion acceptable to the township staff.
They will.
There are three general comments, including item number 3, which is the 12 administrative comments and a memo dated August the 29th by Jason Hines of HRG. All 12 of those have either been completed or will be completed in a timely fashion acceptable to staff.
Yes, they will.
Okay. If you're willing to make that commitment, I'm willing to make the motion.
Any additional questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? If not, could we have a motion then to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the preliminary and final land development plan for Lower Paxton Self-Storage Facility with the 1 zoning approval, the 3 administrative comments, and the 3 general comments, specifically item number 3 addressing the 12 administrative comments outlined by Mr. Hines from HRG.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Lind.
You
No,
can
by
go,
Mr.
that's
Judd.
fine. I went the last time, that's fine.
We're very generous with our seconds tonight. Seconded by Mr. Judd. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? You're off the hook.
Thank you very much for clarifying all that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stein, for
And remember,
clarifying
you're
that for us.
responsible.
That's That's fine.
Okay, as long as you know that.
We'll now move to improvement guarantees, development agreements, et cetera, et cetera. We have release of a couple of releases of 4 releases of letter of credit and a release of an escrow. Any particular issues with any of these, Mr. Stein or Mr. Wolf?
No, there are not.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the improvement guarantees?
Move to approve the improvement guarantees as listed.
So moved. Is there a
6 of them.
second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zumas. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That brings us to the payment of bills of Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority. Madam Treasurer?
I make a motion that we pay the bills for Lower Paxton Township and Lower Paxton Township Authority.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any additional announcements from the board or staff? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye.
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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yippee.